Al-Muddaththir, The Cloaked One, Part 2. When we ended last time, I promised a good long look at line, or ayat, 31, which really stands out here, not only because it addresses Jews and Christians, but also because it is more than 100 words among lines that are otherwise 5 to 10 words. And it reads almost like a footnote, an explanation that completely wrecks the meter of the surah. But nonetheless, despite it standing out like this and in such a bizarre fashion, it's there. Which makes you think, probably, what this thing is. This thing that is either here organically or inserted here, it must be very, very, very important. And we'll talk about that. But before we do, we have to address the line that comes before it. As we approach line 30, this surah is talking about hell, which is a very common topic in the Quran. But unlike anywhere else, this part actually gives specifics about the angels who are guarding hell, and it gives a specific number, 19. Hell is overseen by 19 keepers, we are told. Now, what is the significance of that? That's oddly specific, giving that number. And it's not one of the more common numbers you see in Judaism-based religions, like 7 or 12 or 40. Here we have 19. Now, what does 19 mean here? Theories on this vary. There are some who say it represents the 19 things a Muslim must master to attain salvation, and some dive into numerology and try to say the whole Quran revolves around this number, and many others, including devout Muslims and great scholars, they will tell you it means nothing. Absolutely nothing. It is what you want to make of it. One group that really ran with this was the Baha'i faith, which is an offshoot of Shia Islam. Now, to them, this number represents the unity of everything, and much of the Baha'i life revolves around it. The calendar has 19 months. Some religious texts have 19 units. Some feasts are 19 days. Now, some have pointed out this might owe more to Arabic numerology than this particular Quranic verse, but who knows? Might be. This certainly would inject the number into the religious bloodstream of Islam, which would eventually make its way to the Baha'i faith either way. But like I said, there are few mainstream Muslims who hold this to be anything of significance, numerically at least. Now, what does the Quran itself say about the number 19? It says a lot and a little. And that takes us into line 31. It's a lot of words that clarify very little, just offering more mystery. You could almost see it as kind of a teaser, but a teaser that is never ultimately addressed. And just as a refresher, here is line 31 in its entirety. We have appointed only stern angels as wardens of the fire, and we have made their number only as a test for the disbelievers, so that the people of the book will be certain, and the believers will increase in faith. And neither the people of the book nor the believers will have any doubts. And so that those hypocrites with sickness in their hearts and the disbelievers will argue, what does Allah mean by such a number? In this way, Allah leaves whoever He wills to stray and guides whoever He wills. And none knows the forces of your Lord except He. And this description of hell is only a reminder to humanity. So, a few things here. For one, it's important to remember that this is an early surah. And one way that you can tell that it's an early surah is that the Muslims, the Christians, and the Jews are all presented as being on the same side. At this point, Muhammad may have still thought that what he was doing would be readily embraced by Jews and Christians. But what the number 19 has to do with that is a bit mysterious, or a lot mysterious, or almost entirely mysterious. And I think it's meant to be that way. Now, some try to find value in this number, but most, I think it's fair to say, they tend to see this as a red herring. If you're not familiar with that expression, a red herring is something that's just kind of out there that might actually be an intentional distraction. Either way, it's not important. Or you could also use the term MacGuffin. Now, in storytelling, that's something that moves the plot along, but ultimately is not actually important. Now, sometimes a MacGuffin isn't even named. It doesn't need to be. It's just a tool that's there for the writer. Yusuf Ali is among the commentators who see it this way, and he went as far as to parse out what seeing the 19 angels will do for the different groups of people who see them. And I thought this was interesting. So you have 4 groups here. Number 1, the Muslims. They will see this and they will have their faith increased. Number 2, the people of the book. They will see this and be granted increased clarity and be able to see the truth more fully. Then group number 3, those with diseased hearts. This would be the hypocrites, the insincere, those that are just not all in on their religion. Now these people, they will see this and be even more confused. And then group number 4, the unbelievers. This is something that will just completely perplex them and confuse them even more. I mean, to an even greater degree than those with diseased hearts. And for all those things to happen, if you think about it, the number, which is 19 in this case, is really not that important. It is a MacGuffin. It's all those things that Yusuf Ali just talked about there. They could just as easily happen with any other number. Probably. Although I may amend that slightly by saying, let's go with any prime number. Would do the same thing. Those prime numbers symbolizing unity to some, right? Like 37 would work just as well. And I think it would help to visualize this imaginary scene that's being laid out here. Just imagine you have 2 groups of people. In one group, you have the Muslims and the people of the book. And they are looking at the 19 angels and they're thinking, well, how about that? And these people, through instinct and maybe some religious training, would say something like, 19, how fitting, how wonderful. Or they might say, 19, I don't get it, but God knows what he's doing. Or maybe even better, I'm glad God put those angels between us and the fire. These are people who are thinking clearly. But then you have the other group. These would be the 2 groups among the wicked. And they are obsessing over the number, thinking it needs to be understood, that they need to understand. But really, they don't need to understand this any more than Adam and Eve needed to understand what the forbidden fruit would actually do to them. God is asking for faith and obedience. And if God put 19 angels there, I'm sure he had a dang good reason to put 19 angels there. And it's an interesting commentary on what religious mystery does to certain people. What do you do when you have a paradox or are confronted with the unexplained? Do you say, I don't understand this. Let me contemplate the wonders of that and the being who created it. And this thing is clearly way past my abilities to understand. Or do you say, I don't understand, so surely this is not true? If I don't see and understand every facet of this, then it is surely false. Now, line 31, I think, is addressing this in a religious context, but this is also something that goes for many, many other things. On a similar note, let's skip ahead to line 52. Let me read the last few lines of this surah as a reminder, starting with 49. Okay, this will be 49 to 56. Now, what is the matter with them that they are turning away from the reminder, as if they were spooked zebras fleeing from a lion? In fact, each one of them wishes to be given a personal letter from Allah for all to read. But no, in fact, they do not fear the hereafter. Enough. Surely this Quran is a reminder, so let whoever wills be mindful of it. But they cannot do so unless Allah wills. He alone is worthy to be feared and entitled to forgive. Now, to be perfectly honest, the first thing that jumps out here is not exactly a spiritual thing. It's this whole notion of zebras and lions. Now, no, zebras did not live in Arabia, and this word is often translated as asses. But it really makes you wonder about just how much these people knew about wildlife in Africa. And the part of Africa that had zebras actually really wasn't all that far away. But that's not really important. You could say it's a red herring, if you will. What I really want to focus on and just really zoom on here is line 52, where line 52 says, in fact, each one of them wishes to be given a personal letter from Allah for all to read. And there is something interestingly modern about this. For our time and place, if you're an American or someone living in the West or someone just in the modern Western world that has been built over the last couple hundred years, many of us, we live in an age of extreme individualism. And this is the Quran's version of, hey, you out there, you personally, what are you waiting for? An engraved invitation? And the crazy thing about the world we live in is, for many people, the answer to that is yes. This seems to be addressed to the I believe in myself crowd, and those who pick and choose from a religion like they're at some kind of all-you-can-eat buffet, and assuming that God has given them some kind of personal revelation that overrides anything the church says. And I'm sure there's many versions of this, but this is where the term, for example, the cafeteria Catholic comes from. That's a very popular phrase. Just going down a spiritual buffet and taking some things but leaving others. This is not limited to Catholic Christianity or even Christianity. Some people do this between religions and non-religions and whatever crazy thing they can think of. But in the Christian context, this would be somebody going down the line and saying, hey there, chef, I'll take some transubstantiation. Ooh, in heaven, that's great. I'll take some of that. But oh, yeah, I don't want hell. Yeah. I don't want any sexual morals either. Boy, that Sunday obligation seems inconvenient. I think I'll pass on that today. You get the idea. This is a person acting as if a unique revelation has been given to them, individually, personally, rather than to the church or some kind of greater religion. In extreme cases, you end up with someone like Joseph Smith, who founded the Mormon religion and really just ran completely over that whole one-wife part of Christianity. That tends to be unpopular, particularly with powerful and rich men. But for most people, This just means expecting God to accommodate them rather than the other way around. And I'm sure there is a Muslim version of this. Maybe someone who professes to be a Muslim but drinks alcohol and prays maybe 5 times a year, not 5 times a day, and will attend both pro-Palestine marches and pride parades. They're doing what works for them in the culture, rather than what God tells them to do through the revelation they supposedly believe in. And all this might change if only God himself came to them in a physical and undeniable way and told them to do something. But since they have not been given a personal engraved letter from Allah, they do not heed the warning. And I think that's what's at the heart of line 52. It's addressed to a certain type of person. And just because this happened to have been 1400 years ago, that doesn't mean it's not being addressed to us today as well. Because, again, people do not change. People are the same now as they were 1400 years ago, right? And so, not surprisingly, you see the same thing here as you did then, at least in some capacity. Because, let's be honest, religiously, this actually addresses most of the world. Now, that's why I'm always skeptical of these religious numbers you see. There are not 2 billion Christians in the world. There are not 1 billion Muslims either. Not even close to that. This is it's a category error every time you see that. Because when they're counting this, these people are counted in a census as if religion is an ethnicity. Because for many, that's what it's seen as. I have to be this religion because my father was this religion. And I haven't given it much thought. Do I believe all this stuff? Well, I guess it doesn't really matter. I'm Catholic, or I'm Muslim, or I'm Hindu, even though I have absolutely no idea what's in there, and I don't even care to think about it. This is, of course, wrong. That's not how religion works. Religion is a belief system, and you have to believe to be a believer. And I am continually stunned how many people do not know this or have not even thought about it. And my guess is that was just as true in Muhammad's time. Which brings us to these last 2 lines, 55 and 56. So let whoever wills be mindful of it, but they cannot do so unless Allah wills. He alone is worthy to be feared and entitled to forgive. What it's saying here is those are only mindful who will to be mindful, or who have been given the grace to be receptive to God. But basically, it seems that here, God is in charge of dispensing faith. And this actually seems to be true in my experience. I don't understand it, but faith is a gift. Now, in Christian circles, we say that people cannot convert people, and this is largely true. People don't convert people. The Holy Spirit converts people. You cannot argue someone into faith. And this truism, I think, is true in Christianity and Islam. It's just as perplexing to the believer as the non-believer. Personally, I really can't explain why God continues to pull me out of the diseased bog of my desires over and over. He brings me back to him over and over again. What is this? What is this line between God and me that can't seem to be severed, even when I continually hack at it with a chainsaw? I really don't know. Why am I among those who the Quran says are mindful of it? I don't know. Faith is an unexplainable thing in many ways. And maybe it's just what you start with. And maybe that's just a gift, freely given. As Christians believe, salvation is freely given as a gift to those who want it. You have that little bit of faith, and that faith compounds upon itself. And then the grace comes, and it makes you receptive to even more grace. And then for some of us, for whatever reason, I still don't understand and may never understand, God then piles on with undeniable proofs in our personal lives. See, that doesn't come at the beginning. That comes towards the end. And these things, which were a result of faith, lead to even more faith and then more grace. And these things just grow on each other almost exponentially. And this is something that is both true and impossible to explain. It's mysterious, but it's true. Like the Quran says with these 19 angels who are guarding the gates of hell. It's just something you can see, and that is just obvious to a believer, and you don't even have to fully understand it. Grace compounds grace, faith compounds faith, and it just grows almost feeding on itself sometimes. This is what Jesus meant when he said this, Matthew chapter 13, verse 12. For to those who have, more will be given, and they will have an abundance. But from those who have nothing, even what they have will be taken away. Now, obviously, this is not about economics. This is talking about the spirit world. And who are those who have nothing? That would be the people who are not mindful of God's warnings and commandments and revelations, and those who, as the Quran states in line 53 here, do not fear the hereafter. Thank you, and I'll talk to you next time. Inshallah.